Welcome to the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. This episode is brought to you by Authors Unite. Authors Unite provides you with all the resources you need to become a successful author. You can learn more about Authors Unite and join the free community at authorsunite.com. Now, let's jump into the episode. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. Today I have Abigail Lee with us. She's a real estate advisor and she's part of the signature team at Compass. So welcome to the show, Abigail.
Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for joining us. We'll dive in. The first question I have for you is, what's the best story from your life that has an underlying valuable message?
Well, I'm not very old, so I don't have too many stories to tell, really. But I can tell you my best story is probably just when I decided, so I went to school down south in Virginia for my first year and a half or 2 years of college. And I guess my best story is when I decided to leave. And there's not really any kind of big moment or anything that I can tell you about, but it's just a gut feeling. I can tell you my big story is I was sitting in the parking lot. It's super exciting, actually. I was sitting in the parking lot with my mother, and I had just gotten an unnecessary speeding ticket, and I was like, you know what? I have a gut feeling I'm out of here. And right after that, I came back home and I worked in real estate from then on. And so I guess if you're asking about the message behind it, is that to trust your gut, because you probably have a feeling, just like how you have a feeling about a creepy person staring you down. That gut feeling, it's the same one about major life decisions.
And what's the most valuable piece of information we should know that's within your expertise or industry?
The most valuable piece of information I can offer people pertaining to my industry and expertise is probably to really, it's kind of an instinctual thing again, but also I want to say just don't overpay, but don't worry too much about overpaying. People tend to overthink things, especially in my industry. They tend to think, what if there's something better? Grass is greener. If you love something, it's an emotional value. It's not a monetary value. I see this a lot where people will go into an apartment, they'll go into a house, and they'll be like, this is it. This is perfect for me. And they have to have it. That's what you want to go in with. And so with that, you also should be working with someone who's actually representing you, not necessarily the best deal for you. Somebody's going to cut their commission for you. We see that a lot. Real estate agents cutting their commission in order to potentially help save the buyer some money. But the real estate agent is not doing their best to represent the buyer's needs, look their hardest, just being the best that they can be. So I recommend working with someone who respects you and is working for you, and as well going with your gut when you do find that place.
And what's your best piece of overall business advice, so not necessarily industry specific?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, no worries. So just your best piece of overall business advice. It could be, maybe it's the same, but just not necessarily industry specific.
Not industry specific. So my best piece of industry advice is, I guess if you're asking like for other real estate agents, is don't waste your time, because time is something that you can't buy back. Everyone's in real estate is always looking to spend more money on marketing. Sometimes it's not money, sometimes it's hard work, and sometimes it's knowing actually when to quit.
And if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Probably don't worry as much about what people think, because no one cares what you are doing. They're only focused on themselves.
And in your opinion, it might tie in actually, in your opinion, what's the key to happiness?
The key to happiness is definitely believing in yourself and not being concerned about what other people think. So not having your happiness rely on somebody else. It's all too common, especially amongst younger people.
And what's the best book that you've read, and what was the number one thing you learned from that?
The best book I read is probably not something anybody's heard of. It's called Siberian Dawn. It's something I read a few years ago, but it still remains my favorite. It's about this man who travels through Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So it's more of like a documentary history book. And the message is, even if it scares you, I guess, continue through. And it was just a very interesting adventure. The way he talks about it, it's something I'll never be able to live through because I wasn't alive for the collapse of the Soviet Union. But yeah, I guess the message is to just go through what scares you.
And what's your favorite quote and why?
Well, I usually can't remember quotes for very long. My memory is fleeting. But I'd have to say most recently I wrote down a quote that inspired me. It's by, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Yvonne Chouinard. And it says, "The word adventure has gotten overused. For me, adventure is when everything goes wrong. That's when the adventure starts." I think that's pretty important for most people.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on, Abigail. The last question I have for you before we let you go is, where's the best place for people to find you online?
The best place for people to find me online is either on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm working on Facebook right now, but Facebook's a little antiquated. Or you can go to my website, which is Compass, and then just search Abigail Lee.
Okay, perfect. Thanks again, Abigail. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.